Okay, I guess we can start. Welcome everybody to the panel session on scientific exchange with Cuba, freedom of science, international exchange under conditions of the blockade and pandemic, which is organized by the Science and Society Initiative DESY and the Havana Initiative. DESY is the biggest research laboratory for fundamental research in Germany, with the main site in Hamburg and another site in Zeuthen, close to Berlin. My name is Hannes Jung. I'm scientist at DESY and collaborating with scientists in Cuba since 2013. Together with my colleague Anna Kazakova from DESY, we are chairing the session today. Please note that the session today is recorded and live streamed on YouTube. The Science Society Initiative DESY is a group of people working at DESY, universities and other research institutes, and believe that successful research and development is only possible if research follows a special degree of social responsibility, as it is mostly funded publicly. If our research and behavior follows our social, ecological, and ethical standards, we advocate the responsible handling of natural resources and respecting global climate requirements. And our research pursues goals that are exclusively peaceful and serve the civil society, as well as to improve the peaceful interaction and coexistence for which international collaboration and cooperation is essential. The Havana Initiative is a group of 6 German mediators in Cuba's cultural and academic relation with Germany and beyond. The Havana Initiative started a petition to end the US sanctions against Cuba on the platform change.org and called upon on the German government to use its influence in the European Union to protect more actively German, European, and Cuban citizens from the negative effects of these unilateral sanctions and facilitate cooperation with Cuba at all levels. The petition has been supported by more than 60 well-known personalities, including filmmakers like Wim Wenders, Fanti Akin, the president of the German Academy of Arts, Janine Meerapfel, and Germany's former Minister of Justice, Herta Däubler-Gmelin, among many others. Almost 60,000 people have signed the petition so far, and the German government has declared in response to the petition that it opposed unilateral sanctions. Freedom of science is an essential ingredient for successful science and helps also to build bridges between different countries, regions, and cultures. The research laboratories DESY and CERN, among many others, have a long tradition in international collaborations. Even during the Cold War, scientists collaborated and worked peacefully together, establishing excellent science and allowing to build up friendships over all borders. Today, science exchange is largely based on the internet, which offers great possibilities to be in contact with scientists all over the world, provided they have good internet connection and the necessary tools. During 2020, during the pandemic, the importance of internet connection became very obvious. The internet connection to Cuba is still not good and not at the same level as in other countries in Latin America and South America. For the panel, I also wrote a letter to our Chancellor Angela Merkel. Honestly, I didn't expect any reply, but last Friday, her office replied, very friendly and supportive, thanking us for our engagement for the scientific exchange with Cuba and wishing us success for our future prospects. We are very pleased to welcome Ambassador Mr. Ripoll Diaz, Ambassador of Cuba in Germany, to say a few welcome words. I will now give the microphone to the Ambassador, Mr. Ripoll Diaz. Please.
Morning in Havana, good afternoon in Hamburg. We are Hannes Jung. They dear participants attending this event, and we dedicated organizers, science, and initiatives at DESY and Havana initiatives with them, scientific exchange with Cuba, freedom of science, international exchange under conditions of the blockade and pandemic. I thank those who had this initiative to organize this event in order to analyze how scientific exchange with Cuba can advance, despite the adverse conditions imposed by the blockade and the challenges that the restrictions imposed by the pandemic meant for the country. In the Constitution of the Republic of Cuba, which came into force on April 19th last year, it is clearly defined in its Article 32, paragraph F, that creative and research activity in science is free. Scientific research is encouraged with a focus on development and innovation, prioritizing that which is directed towards solving problems that are in the interest of society and for the benefit of the people. A major effort is currently being made to implement all the new aspects of this new constitution, including those linked to science and research. The purpose is to create better conditions for this development, to play a more role in the future growth of our economy, and thus contribute to a better quality life for our people. For 60 years, we have been facing the consequences of the blockade caused by the US government, and everything related to scientific research, including by hindering the links between US scientists and academics, but which is other countries. And we will take today about the between Cuba and Germany. Since we will be talking about a scientific exchange between Cuba and Germany, it is a good moment to remember that next December 19th will be the 200th anniversary of the arrival in Cuba for the first time of Alexander von Humboldt, a precursor of this action and who will be forever a personality who links very closely the scientists and academics of our two countries. We hope that this virtual panel will meet the expectations of its organizers, and for similar efforts in the future, you can count on the support we can offer you from the Embassy of the Republic of Cuba in Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very nice and very well received introductory words to our panel discussion. Thanks very much. We are now about to start the panel discussion with the aim to review the situation of scientific exchange between Cuba and Germany and Europe, to understand the difficulties of exchange because of the embargo blockade, and in addition, during this year, because of the pandemic restrictions. We also want to discuss which concrete ideas and ways exist and can be thought of for better scientific and cultural exchange with Cuba. We are very pleased to have on the panel Dr. Michael Marquez Millares, Vice Decan of the INSTEC Institute for Research, Postgraduate Education and International Collaboration, young associate member of the Cuban Academy of Science, and institutional coordinator of the Latin American Network for Education and Nuclear Technology. We have then Professor Dr. Helmut Dosch, who is the chairman of the DESY Board of Directors and is since 2013 vice president of the Helmholtz Association. Before joining DESY, he was director of the Max Planck Institute for Metal Research in Stuttgart. Then we have Professor Dr. Fernando Guzman, also from INSTEC Havana. He has a close connection to Germany. He did his PhD in 1984 in Dresden, went then back to Cuba, was rector of INSTEC Institute, and is now full professor at Havana University in theoretical physics. We have Dr. Sandra Consequera Rodriguez. She studied physics in Havana, completed her PhD at Hamburg University, and is now postdoc at DESY. We have Dr. Armando Bermudez Martinez, who studied physics also in Cuba, did his PhD in Hamburg, and is now postdoc at DESY. And we are pleased to have Dr. Ariela Catay from CERN. She is physicist and she has organized the ICFA Instrumentation Conference in 2017 in Cuba. We have then Dr. Ulrike Dorfmüller. She is a lecturer from the DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Program at Havana University. Since 2013, she is guest professor at the Faculty of Foreign Languages, and she is consulting Cuban or German scholars on the possibilities of scientific exchange between the two countries regarding all scientific disciplines. And we have Dr. Rainer Schulz, a founding director of the Consortium for Advanced Studies Abroad, CASA, in Havana. He holds a PhD in Latin American history from Harvard University and the University of Cologne. A very warm welcome to all of our panel members. During the panel session, everybody can ask questions in the question and answer chat. We will collect them and bring some of them to the panel at the end of the session. All questions will be recorded and answered offline and will be made available on our web pages. After the panel session, we will have some time for discussion where everybody can raise his hand and bring up points concerned with the scientific exchange with Cuba. I would now like to give the floor to the Vice Rector of Havana University.
For many years, since 2013, students from the state are coming to DESY as summer students and other postgraduate activities. While the education and training of the students of DESY are very important and give a chance to participate in modern particle physics research. A real and continuous scientific exchange with scientists and students in Cuba cannot yet be established. On the one hand, the computer facilities are not available, but much more important is the quality of the internet connection, which is not sufficient and fast enough for a group of scientists and students to participate in the daily meeting and scientific discussion. Moreover, and even more, the blockade also excludes video service like Zoom to be used in Cuba and other important services. When excluded from scientific and cultural exchange and discussion to make the world country's future, especially for younger generation, very insulated and challenging. The Humboldt Highway Initiative from DESY and Havana University aim to overcome in the short term the difficulties coming from the blockade. Starting such a project only for scientific and cultural exchange should be possible without any problem, as it is in accordance with freedom of science and culture. With the Humboldt Highway Initiative, we could enroll in a continuous and intense exchange in science, starting with particle physics, but it can and should also be extended to include other physics and science areas in general, and music and art. Both fields are essential for evolving society, and both fields form a bridge of exchange away from any political difference or economic interest. The University of Havana welcomes very much the Humboldt Highway Initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very nice and very positive statement from the Havana University. Thanks very much. I would now like to give the floor to Professor Dr. Helmut Dosch and ask what is from his perspective the role of international collaboration and where DESY could play a role in the collaboration with Cuba.
Yeah, thank you, Hannes. So I'm really extremely pleased that we have this scientific exchange today in this video format with friends in Cuba, and also with stakeholders here who could, also help, in order to get to improve things. So those of you who know DESY well know that, we are, since our beginning 60 years ago, so we had a strong understanding that science, when you are working in complex fields, needs international cooperation. So we have been, since 60 years, been involved in international cooperations all over the world, and also with countries and communities who experience difficulties of several kinds. And this is also belongs to the tradition of my lab, also to help also scientific communities in parts of the world who are having, excellent scientists, but are actually, experience difficulties in, participating in the with the international community. I also say very very openly that, my lab is very strongly defending freedom of science, and so we are extremely sensitive to everything which takes this at risk. So we have launched panel discussions also here on site, discussing what the current problems are. So you see now today, fake news are all over. Science is partly taking as an opinion among many others, and this is something, which is not acceptable to my lab, and so we are here extremely sensible and also active in order to assure that, science is one of the vectors for the future. So we see, particularly now in the current pandemic, where a society can trust on, it's essentially, according to our experiences, democratic systems and the voice of science, which helps us getting out of the pandemic. So science, as I said, is communication and discussion with scientific colleagues in order to make progress. So that and therefore, it's clear that, in our current interaction with you, we must make, the necessary steps that, scientists from Cuba can participate on an international level, in all relevant, projects, in workshops, in conferences, in discussion meetings, and so on. Otherwise, this is an unacceptable situation. So many of you know that we have a very long-lasting cooperation with Cuba and with scientists from Cuba. So since many years, we have summer students here, and they are doing extremely well. So PhD students are doing their dissertation here at DESY, and we have several PhD students already who have successfully passed the exam. We do have actually postdocs now here at DESY from who have been doing their PhD students here at DESY, and since 3 years or so, we have this cooperation agreement with the University of Havana on particle physics, particularly. So this is on chromodynamics and Monte Carlo simulations. So, so we see this enormous challenges which our friends in Cuba have to carry out science because of the blockade, and now the pandemic comes in addition, which is really a explosion of problems you have. So with the pandemic now, we could not have scientific visits of you here in our laboratory. The summer student program also had to stop. And even now some PhD students who we wanted to accommodate could not start their work here. So these are, of course, additional challenges which we will overcome next year. So I mean, I'm pretty sure that this pandemic is not for good, but pretty sure that maybe in the second half of next year we could see that the situation relaxes a little bit, that we could start to reinstall face-to-face cooperations with the entire world, but also in particular also with students and scientists from Cuba. So this, Fernando also said, a precondition is of course that one hooks up Cuban scientists to an efficient internet connection, and therefore I'm really very happy about this proposal on this Humboldt Highway, and I'm really eager to learn more about it and eager to learn how we can organize this. I can only say that DESY will strongly support the establishment of a fast internet connection, whatever we can do, what is in our power, so to speak. So after this workshop here, this panel discussion, so I'm really available also to enter into next steps, what could be done. So also here in our place on a national level. So I'm really volunteering to get in touch with the Max Planck Society and other research organizations, whether we can join forces in order to really establish something substantial with you. I'm not so one has to explore whether one could also integrate the European platform here, a commission, in order to see what could be done. So as I say, I'm really happy that this discussion takes place today, and that we explore a little bit, what must be done, what could be done, what would be the next steps in order really to get Cuban scientists back, to international interaction, which is really of high importance, not only for science, but I think also for the development of the country. So therefore, again, I'm happy to be here today, and I wanted to particularly thank Hannes Jung, because he is one of our, does not stop working for this collaboration. But Hannes knows that he has the full support of the management of DESY in his efforts. So again, welcome everybody here, and I'm happy to learn more about your ideas and visions for increasing and improving the cooperation with Cuban scientists. And again, so I'm really stand by helping whatever I can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was very nice and very good to hear that DESY from the management is supporting this initiative and will make anything possible to make a fast internet connection to Cuba possible. Then this is really very good. Thanks very much for this statement. I would now like to give the floor to Professor Dr. Fernando Guzman, and would like to know from him how important, from his perspective, international collaboration is, and where he sees the bottleneck for this international collaboration at the moment. Fernando, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me the floor this virtual broadcast. It is a pleasure for me to participate in this online meeting organized by DESY and discuss an aspect of science and the necessary cooperation. Our ties to DESY date back to a sponsored project dedicated to high energy physics, the HELEN project, some years ago. That allowed the students of my institute to begin to get involved in particle physics. Later, the DESY summer school became a possibility for our young people to participate in this fascinating field of high energy physics. It has and will continue to impact our society's development, given the relevant role that science and innovation have acquired at the beginning of the 21st century. We are living in a 2020 with some complex signals. On the one hand, the coronavirus pandemic has led to economic and social restrictions. On the other hand, a record number of tropical storms have been generated in the Atlantic, perhaps due to climate change. This year has also been marked by a worsening of the inhuman and irrational blockade to my country. Still unspeakable limits that affect democracy on a global scale. What I want to say in this short contribution, I will refer to some modest ideas based on my personal experience in science, education, and collaboration. The first is that we live in an interconnected world that needs cooperation rather than words and pressure. There is much room to make this cooperation more effective, which will result in a better world for all. The second, there is much talk about sustainable development, but concrete action on a global scale are still insufficient. Sustainable development cannot be so isolated from cooperation. One has to see it in its total dimension and see it as a joint action of humankind. In my view, this is a challenge. Third, the pandemic has demonstrated the role that current communication technologies can play in maintaining contacts and drawing signs. The Humboldt Highway initiative could be of grand value in the current condition for Cuba. In this context, I would mention the limitation we have with internet access due to external and foreign policies that restrict its wide use, including access to bibliographic sources, calculation on large computer, and participation in online courses and conferences. Finally, I want to add a few words. Collaboration with DESY has led to the preparation in the last year of 5 students who have already completed the PhD. The value of this cooperation is not only scientific, but broader in sense. It also encompasses culture and history. I can affirm that science helps build bridges between nations, leading to peace and friendship. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for this very good and very positive statements and words. Thanks very much. I would now like to give the microphone to Dr. Sandra Consequera Rodriguez and hear about she views scientific collaboration and the communication with Cuba.
Yes,
Sandra, please.
Okay, thank you, Hannes. First, I would like to say that I'm really happy to participate in today's discussion and offer my perspective, having had the opportunity to complete my undergraduate studies in Cuba work at my home university there before actually coming to DESY for graduate studies. As we have been discussing, the phenomenon of globalization has made the international collaboration a necessity to actually be able to impulse projects and make substantial progress. As we know, collaboration between Cuba and Germany, Europe in general, occurs mainly through the supervision of students, participation in summer student programs, as it has been discussed, and also organization of joint events. But all these activities are often, as we know, slowed down or even halted due to the effects of the political mainstream of the moment. And in the case of Cuba, we know that the blockade has certainly a high weight on this. I believe, as it has been discussed today, that it should always be possible to overcome political differences and concentrate on what unites us, which in the case of science is the passion for knowledge, for unraveling the mysteries of science. In Cuban universities, there is already a very good environment to gather knowledge and valuable skills that I particularly treasure, and the solid base have allowed me to reach new goals in my scientific career here at DESY. Nevertheless, as it has been discussed, it's a reality that in Cuba and at our universities and research centers, the access to computing facilities and further resources which are needed for modern scientific work is affected by the blockade and also other internal factors. The internet connectivity and the remote meetings were already kind of like a standard in large collaborations. But with the COVID-19 pandemics, this is even more crucial to actually stay tuned and really up to date with the efforts within the working group. It really helps to optimize the work, and of course it allows person to person small updates during the working days, and this is extremely helpful. Therefore, if members of a group or a research team have limited access to these possibilities, then it faces a real disadvantage. So I believe that it is quite important that the talent is able to develop regardless of the nationality. That all the people in principle should have the same chance to succeed doing if they do their best effort, and that political decisions, as is the case of the blockade, certainly damage this possibility for some of our human citizens. So yeah, with this final thought, I close my statement down. Thank you again for the possibility to participate in today's panel.
Thanks very much, Sandra, for these nice words and some insights in how young scientists suffer from the present situation. I would now like to hear from Dr. Armando Bermudez Martinez on his experience with science in Europe and in the collaboration with Cuba. Armando, please.
So thank you, Hannes, and also my deep gratitude to all of you who made this event possible. So the blockade affects virtually all areas of scientific research and exchange, from the organization of events to access to new technologies to something as basic as important as effective remote communication. From the moment my career got embedded in the context of broad international scientific collaboration, the blockade stopped being an abstract, let's say, entity for me and became something very present, very tangible. So, and this is what I want to share with you. So the story of the first time I could feel the consequences of this policy firsthand. So it was back in the summer of 2015 in Ecuador. So it was the Latin American School of High Energy Physics. It was also the first time I took part in an event organized by CERN. So basically it was amazing. So it was one of the best experiences I had in my career so far. So the organization, the social activities, the lectures, the venue, everything was perfect. So I wanted a bit of that for Cuba also. So an event that could boost the interest in high energy physics, that could bring students from all over the world, and that would bring the Cuban physics community and the CERN community closer together. So as soon as I had the chance, I ran to the organizers and wishfully asked if there was any chance to organize one of these schools in Cuba, or one of the next schools, for the reasons I already mentioned. So the answer was shocking, although it shouldn't have been so, since I had lived under the influence of the blockade for most of my life, right? But anyway, so they said, actually with long faces, that unfortunately this was not possible. And the reason was that it could seriously affect CERN, since the US is one of its main contributors. So now notice that it was back in 2015, still under the Obama administration. So one can try only to imagine how things were in the administration that preceded, and more importantly, in the administration that followed, and that is now coming to an end. So after hearing this story, one can perhaps also picture the potential number of initiatives that could never become reality because of the fear of an eventual retaliation. So the blockade has not only affected the Cuban society, particularly in science, but has also seriously hindered the full Cuban potential to be an active part of international scientific collaborations, which clearly affects Cuba overall, but certainly not only. And yes, with that, I want to. So I finished my what I wanted to say. So if we want to discuss them, we can discuss in the discussion session. So thanks a lot again.
Thanks very much, Armando. This was very interesting to hear the experience, how difficult it is to organize workshops in Cuba. I would now like to call on Dr. Ariela Catay from CERN. She has organized a big international workshop a few years ago in Havana. So Ariela, what is your experience with scientific exchange with Cuba?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and I wanted to share my experience from the ICFA School on Instrumentation that I succeeded to organize in Cuba in 2017, and that was at the University of Informatics Science. Now, just one word to understand what the school is. It's 15 days of lectures and laboratories. Is a school that I bring to countries that are unprivileged from the technological point of view. And the intention is to leave thereafter all the equipment that was used for the laboratories. Now, to go to Cuba, we had to face several challenges. From the organizational point of view, understand that the seed to bring this school to Cuba arose in 2001 at North Conference, and Professor Guzman remember that. And from 2001, I managed to bring the school to Cuba only in 2016. Actually 2017. In 16, I got the okay to bring it, and the malicious people said in a funny way that only after that Obama went to Cuba and the Pope went to Cuba, I could manage to go as well. Now, yes, we went, but unfortunately in 2017, there were many things changed quite a lot in the international panorama, and this affected quite a lot the school. In fact, we lost all the financial support from our US colleague, and also all the American professor and student could not participate. Now, there were many challenges from the software and connectivity point of view. The school offers several laboratories that need internet, laboratories like for medical application and cancer treatment, FPGA, something around the controls, and it was not possible to access to all these laboratories, despite the fact that the Cuban expert and the school tutors worked some like 1.5 months to install all the necessary software on the Cuban PC in order to avoid the internet connectivity during the school, because the connection was very feeble. Nonetheless, some of the software was impossible to install, and we had to brought it to the school, to Cuba, with the USB sticks, with some attention, because there is an embargo also on the software that you can bring to Cuba. Some other software was just brought on personal laptop by the professors that came to teach, because this software was incompatible with the Cuban PC. Many laboratories could not be offered because it was impossible to have this connection, and we had a major goal that failed. Is the following: we wanted to establish a permanent link between Cuba and Miami, and this goal was pursued by the chair of the ICFA Standing Committee for Interregional Connectivity, and in contact with all the appropriate people, but although they worked for several months, they could not succeed. Other challenges that unfortunately we had deal with the hardware of the laboratories. I transported there some 350 kilos of instrumentation from CERN to Cuba in a temporary way. And I had to analyze each single item, each single ADC, oscilloscope, or whatever, and prove that it was compatible with the specification that are set. In that case, since I was at CERN, the specification was set by the Swiss State Secretariat for the Economy. And if this instrumentation was not compatible, I had to justify in great detail why it was incompatible, but why I could bring it in any case. Now, the sad thing, the one that I regret most in this school, is that despite of all our effort, none of the laboratory instrumentation that we brought to Cuba, we couldn't leave it there. And then none also of the many presents that we receive from our colleague, our physicists all around the world. So it was impossible for us to leave in a permanent way any equipment to be used by the local student and so on. So this is my experience.
Thanks very much, Ayala, for this very important experience and reporting to us the difficulties to organize a school in Cuba. Thanks very much. This was very interesting and very important.
Thank you.
I would now like to move a bit away from the physics part of our session and would like to give the microphone to Dr. Ulrike Dorfmüller. She is lecturer from the German Academic Exchange Program in Havana and would like to ask, how is your experience with the communication with Cuba and the internet access? Ulrike, please.
Thank you very much, Hannes. I would like, first of all, to greet all of the dear colleagues who are attending this event in front of their desktops from Cuba or from Germany or other parts of the world. I can see your faces, I can see your names on the list, and I'm very glad that you're here and that we keep collaborating in this digital way. Working as a DAAD lecturer means that on the one hand, I teach at the German department of University of Havana, and on the other hand, I advise and give information to scientists, students, and professors who wish to collaborate scientifically between Germany and Cuba. International scientific exchange is the main objective of DAAD. So to foster this exchange has been one of my core focus in the last years. And that's how I could gather some useful insight in the topic we are talking about today. The topic today is the free scientific exchange with Cuba. In general, we can say that scientific exchange between Cuba and Germany is at a rather good level. There are a lot of activities in many branches of science. For the moment, I'm talking about the pre-pandemic situation. Many of those contacts exist since the 60s, 70s, 80s. They go back to scientific relations between Cuba and the GDR. And if we look at it from today, it was a wise decision not to reject this legacy, but to use it to set up fruitful and dynamic scientific exchange. Particularly strong is the collaboration in natural sciences, chemistry, biology, biotechnology, in technical sciences and engineering, and in social sciences. The topics are, for example, health, entrepreneurship education, biodiversity, translation, architectural life cycle management, to name only some of them. The biggest part of the cooperation is DAAD funded. For example, in 2018, more than 300 scholars have been supported by DAAD programs, 200 Cubans, some of them alumni, and 100 Germans, especially PhD students, postdocs, and scientists. And here in this meeting, I see also PhD students that I know from Havana. Besides research and teaching, higher education management is also an important area of collaboration to support the installation of international university and research structures. Apart from DAAD, also the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research has scientific exchange with Cuban institutions. The BMBF offered several bilateral calls since 2017. Also, Humboldt Foundation and DFG, German Research Foundation, have regularly projects with Cuban partner institutions. In addition, funding from the European Union is used in scientific exchange between Cuba and Germany, mostly students exchange, but also a project in research and capacity building. So that was to show you that there is a big variety of scientific contacts that we already have. And all those mentioned funding institutions foster these exchanges because they find interesting partners in the 51 Cuban universities and countless research institutes. So having said that, where is the problem then? Of course, we have heard many people talking about the experiences. So me as well, as far as I could observe in my daily work during the last years, one of the obstacles in the free flow of scientific international exchange are the conditions that the US embargo brings along. The embargo is not the only difficulty Cuba has to deal with or international partners have to deal with when they work in Cuba or with Cuba, but it is in fact a very big challenge that concerns many aspects of the international exchange. I could, for example, regularly see the problems that Cuban students or researchers have to organize the financial aspects of their study or research stay. For example, to open a bank account in Germany. Many banks don't accept Cubans as customers only because they are Cuban nationals. But DAAD needs a bank account in Germany to transfer monthly grants to. In the end, the scholars mostly find solutions, resuelven, but they often depend a lot on the help of their German counterparts. So that is one example of a systematic difficulty in the exchange. Another one is the difficult handling of project accounting. All the project leaders that attend this panel know exactly what I'm talking about, I guess. The transfer of project funds, for example, via bank account is so difficult, error-prone, or simply impossible that it can really drive you up the wall. These difficulties can bring existing projects into crisis, or they can hinder the becoming of new projects. Sometimes possible new scientific partners in Germany shrink back from cooperation because they expect problems, for example, with importation or negative effects on their projects with US or other partners. We have already heard that. Then there is the important aspect of difficulties to participate in digital scientific meetings. Many video platforms are US owned and not open for Cuban users. And it's very hard to convince German partner institutions to change the platform they usually use for digital international activities. We are very happy that for this meeting here with DESY, we can use the Deutsches Forschungsnetz. But it is certainly a very challenging topic for the next months and years to find technical solutions for digital international scientific exchange that work on a bigger scale. So the situation can be summed up by good level and fruitful scientific international exchange, but in a very challenging political and practical framework. Under the conditions of pandemic, things have, of course, become more complicated, as we all know. Physical mobility has lost its key function in the international exchange and will certainly not get it back after whatever normalization we will reach one day. Instead, international exchange has to find digital formats of collaboration. That's what we all do since spring 2020. After the rescue mode of the first month, we now observe a phase of professionalization of digital international exchange. Ecology, inclusion, egalitarian access to education. These are just some of the positive aspects that digitalization brings along. At the same time, care must be taken to ensure that mechanization as part of the digital transformation does not create new social inequalities. The digital gap is a real risk, and we have to bring in all of our energy, brain, and dedication to work on concepts to minimize its effects. Cuban-German scientific exchange should become part of that community of practice by using the possibilities we already have, and we do have, and should in addition participate in the international theoretical discussion on digital higher education, its forms, its opportunities and risks, its digital teaching concepts, etc. I think, for example, of the long-standing experience Cuba has with university classes in distance learning, cursos a distancia, and thus the didactics of remote teaching and learning in higher education. Also, insufficient technical equipment is not a Cuban privilege. It's the case in many countries. So it's important to develop concepts of digital international cooperation that work under those medium conditions. We have to think of intelligent solutions that work with open source or technical solutions developed at home. In order to support digital internationalization, DID has developed some new programs. For example, a program that helps to transform existing study programs into digital study programs, or a program called IVAC, International Virtual Academic Collaboration, that is designed to build new digital networks to elaborate new study programs with a digital design or blended mobility. IVAC will reopen for 2021. Also, the traditional DID programs continue to work if the pandemic conditions allow for it. For example, physical exchange is restarting slowly. We have, for example, 2 guest professors who work actually in Cuba. Thanks to the good handling of the COVID crisis, the German Robert Koch Institute has classified Cuba as a no-risk country, so that was possible. Other activities, of course, have gone digital, as for example, the DID lectorate. Now I'm doing the teaching online, online classes, online tests, electronic consultancy. We have online lectures, webinars, workshops, for example, the International Deans course for Latin American Deans. This year is a digital edition, of course. A couple of days ago, we had the International Summer School in Economics and Management that took place virtually. So that's good that we start having this digital practice. So even if the conditions of scientific exchange and the internet situation sometimes are difficult and discouraging, can be discouraging, there are plenty of opportunities online and offline. And with the Humboldt Highway ahead, things will only get better. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Ulrike, for this very good and very nice overview of the difficulties, but also pointing out the opportunities and challenges ahead of us. Thanks very much. This was very nice. Unfortunately, our Director General from DESY had to leave the panel. He has to join another meeting at 5 o'clock. So unfortunately, I can't continue in the discussion.
Yeah,
very nice.
So, let me again thank you all, and so I can only guarantee you. So I'm standby in finding good solutions for the future. I'm also inviting the ambassador, to stay in touch with me to find ways to mitigate the problems Cuban scientists experience. So I think the times are difficult politically and scientifically, but this should not prevent us in thinking of good solutions. So again, so please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm really very, very strongly committed to also assist Cuban scientists to make progress for the future. So thank you all. Unfortunately, I must leave now. That's unfortunate, but Hannes will tell me about the conclusions of that, and then we see what can be done further. Thank you and bye-bye. Good luck and all the best to Cuba. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. This was very nice. Okay, I would now like to hear from Dr. Rainer Schulz from the Consortium for Advanced Studies Abroad, CASA, in Havana. He will make some remarks on the accomplishments, challenges, and prospects of US-Cuban academic exchange in the light of the recent elections. Rainer, please. I will share your slides. Rainer? We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me in Germany?
Yeah. Now.
Yes, good.
Hear you. So I will share your slides.
Buenos dias desde La Habana. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. As Hannes mentioned in the beginning, I'm a German citizen, but I'm actually working in Havana now for Cuba for 2 years. I'm the director of the Consortium for Advanced Studies Abroad, and we have brought over the last 5 years more than 350 students from the United States to Cuba to spend a semester here in Havana and learn about Cuban society and academic experiences. We also brought a lot of faculty from different disciplines to Cuba. And before that, I worked at Harvard's Cuban Studies program, one of the biggest, most diverse in the country. And we have brought more than 100 Cuban faculty to Harvard to do research and collaboration with their American partners. So like Armando earlier, I have a lot of first-hand experience in the academic exchange with Cuba and the difficulties that the US sanctions represent to that exchange. I thought, since I'm not directly involved anymore in the German-Cuban exchange, which is the topic of today's panel, I take a step back and talk a little bit about the framework and US-Cuban academic relations and the potentials they have and the complications that they were in the past and that still remain. So can we go to the first slide? To the next, yes. So the main points I want to make in the 8 minutes that I have is, first of all, to point out how important the Cuban-US scientific collaboration has been all along. They have a rich but also complicated history and go back, probably maybe the first well-known case was Carlos J. Finlay's research on the dengue fever in the 1880s. And when in fact during the US military occupation, it was first implemented nationwide in Cuba, the scientific accomplishments during that time. I think because of the geographic proximity, the shared history and culture, the United States and Cuba are natural allies in scientific collaboration. And I believe that despite the political differences, the US sanctions and the interrupted diplomatic relations for a long time, the academic exchange has never totally ceased. And I think the US sanctions and the changing legal framework make collaboration complicated, as we heard in previous presentations. It also makes them more costly because legal advice is needed, and it makes it more volatile because it's hard to plan. And then to end on a positive note, I think that the incoming Biden administration and the pressing global problems such as diseases, the current pandemic, global warming, hurricanes, and other natural disasters make the cooperation with Cuba not only more likely, but especially necessary. So the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, great. I'm not going to go deep into the history, although I would like to, because as a historian, I'm convinced that a historical understanding is important to know where we are and why it is so complicated. But especially for the DESY participants of this panel, I think it might be important to remember that Cuba, when it finally became independent from Spain, from the Spanish Empire, the United States intervened militarily and occupied Cuba for a couple of years. But during that occupation, something very interesting happened academically, and that was probably the largest academic exchange ever in Cuba's history. And that was the University of Harvard invited at the time in 1900, half of Cuba's school teachers, about 1,200 Cuban school teachers traveled from Havana to Boston to attend Harvard Summer School and were trained in modern teaching techniques. And I'll have some slides for you just to give an illustration of that part of the history. And I'm not going to go into details, but during the Cuban Republic between 1902 and 1958, there was an impressive but unequal development of public and private education. At the eve of the revolution, there were only 3 public universities and 6 small private colleges. One of them was the Colegio Belén, where Fidel Castro studied, and some others were there. A lot of the Cuban schools had quite a strong US influence, and I'll show you an image in a second to illustrate this. Then obviously, people know, especially our Cuban colleagues here at this panel, that after 1959, there was a very strong investment in education and science, and that's why we have such brilliant Cuban scholars these days in Germany and in other countries. So just briefly, the next 3 slides, please, just some illustrations. At the end of the day in Germany, I just wanted to make it a little more entertaining. This is an image of Cuban teachers, women who traveled, they traveled by boat. At the time, there were no airplanes, to Harvard in 1900. And then the next slide. And this is, to me, a very telling image. And in 1900, when during the US military occupation, there was a lot of investment in the public school infrastructure, but it came under a certain political framework. And that is captured in the image that you see here. There's a blackboard, and it says Cuba Libre, Free Cuba. But on top of the blackboard, there's an American flag waving. And I think this tension has run through most of 20th century in Cuban history. And then the next slide. Just to illustrate the strong American influence in Cuba's education system, which has everything, positive and negative aspects. You see here an image of one of Cuba's prestigious private schools, Ruston Academy, one of the biggest. And you see the Cuban and American flag, and it looks more or less like an American prep school. So that was part of the Cuban educational experience throughout the Republic. And then we can go 2 slides further, please. Great. This is just briefly for people to keep in mind. In 1961, diplomatic relations were ended and the sanctions began. The sanctions that we talk about today and that still impact our necessary scientific exchange. But, and this is important to emphasize, even though there were sanctions and it has ever since been prohibited for US citizens to travel to Cuba unless they are explicitly authorized through a government authorization. There was always some level of continuity of academic exchange between Cuba and the United States, mostly by individuals who managed to circumvent the difficult circumstances and maintained projects with their Cuban partners. But at that time, obviously, as Ulrike Dorfmüller had mentioned before, Cuba started to collaborate with the socialist world, especially the GDR, and that's why you have so many Cubans who are so fluent in German, and which is a great asset to have for the German academic exchange. I won't go into the rest. We can please skip to the next slide. So this is more or less where we are right now. People have talked about it, especially in 2014. President Barack Obama and Raúl Castro announced a new era. Diplomatic relations between the two countries were finally reestablished in 2015, and 22 memorandums of understanding were signed in law enforcement, migration, the environment, but also in science. In fact, there had been an agreement between the Cuban Academy of Science and the American Association for the Advancement of Science a year before, and that is still an important building block in the scientific relations. And then, as people know, President Obama came to visit Cuba and issued a new policy directive towards the normalization of relations between the two nations. Unfortunately, once Donald Trump was elected in November 2016, he announced a reversal of the Obama policies, not just in relation to Cuba, but in every other policy matter, basically, and announced a policy of maximum pressure towards Cuba. There were more than 200 new sanctions against the island, and many affecting academic exchanges. Most people here on this panel know, and I myself certainly know from my experience. And one thing that is specifically complicated is that the US Embassy and the consulate has been reduced to a minimum. So what people were talking about before, it is currently virtually impossible for a Cuban scientist to obtain a visa to go to the United States, even if he or she has been invited for research purposes. There's some complicated way through third countries I could talk about in the question and answer if you like, but there's no direct way of getting to the United States currently through an official visa. But then we have the good news that Joe Biden was elected earlier this month and promised to return to the Obama policy. And maybe we can just go towards the next few slides briefly, and I will come to an end. So here you see some images from the New York Times about Obama's historic visit and how a lot of American universities and science institutions then came along, visited Cuba, and sought to foster, renew, and build academic relationships with their Cuban partners. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, this academic spring between Cuba and the United States lasted relatively shortly, because as I mentioned before, once Trump came into office, everything became more complicated again as the administration announced new restrictions towards Cuba. Next slide, please. So these are some headlines that you can see anywhere in the internet, how it became difficult to maintain scientific relations between Cuba and the United States under Trump. But even so, there's some hope. There's still a continued level of cooperation at some institutions. For example, the journal Medic, which emphasizes and publishes and supports Cuban-American cooperation in the health and science sector. They continue to hold events, now more virtually than in presence, but these are things that can be built on in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are some of the practical problems for the academic exchange today? We've talked about some. The travel limitations, and President Trump prohibited any flight to Cuba except for to Havana. And the visa restrictions we talked about, Ulrike Dorfmüller talked about the banking problems. So even if a Cuban scholar gets a stipend, he or she, it's almost impossible for them to receive the money in advance. Cubans mostly don't have a credit card, so traveling and making advance reservations is very complicated. There's practically no postal service between the United States and Cuba, even though it was reestablished. It is very difficult for labs and research labs to bring any materials, any things they work with to the United States or vice versa. The communication and research, we talked about it. Zoom, the most globally used platform, is technically illegal to be used in Cuba or by Cubans. And thanks to the DESY, I'm able to connect today through a different channel from Havana. So that is something that has to be worked on. And an important measure that Trump also implemented was the canceling of the license for professional meetings. So whereas before a lot of American associations, for example, of chemistry and others, would hold their professional annual meetings here in Cuba for the first time, this is no longer possible. They have to go through a very complicated and costly process of getting special licenses. And all these constant changes in the regulations by the US government make it very hard for an institution to plan and develop scientific initiatives with Cuba. They often need costly legal advice, and the projects might be affected during their duration. And I want to end with the last slide, please. And these are things and measures that I think would be the most important ones for the Biden administration once he's inaugurated, hopefully in January 2021. The first and most important, to resume regular consulate and diplomatic activities. That would be the precondition to facilitate visas for Cuban colleagues again. Then it should allow for the economic transaction and banking relations, at least for the authorized activities such as educational research, professional meetings, etc. Then it should also reactivate the existing memorandums of understanding and bilateral agreements that I mentioned before. It is important to emphasize that they have never been canceled, even by the Trump administration. They have not been actively engaged in, but they were not canceled. The Postal Service has to be reestablished. DHL used to operate in Cuba. And the travel ban should be, of course, lifted and reauthorize the pre-existing categories for scholars and other citizens from the United States to come to Cuba. And I think it is very important, as also Helmut Dorsch mentioned in the beginning, for the new Biden administration to issue positive signals about the importance of science in general, but also for the scientific collaboration with neighboring Cuba. And with that, I would like to end. Sergio Guerra Pastrana, the executive director of the Cuban Academy of Science, said in a publication, "In moments of crisis, new opportunities for joint scientific projects always emerge." He said that when, during the Cuban-Spanish-American War, the findings of Carlos Rota Finlay were applied, the findings that the mosquito was the transmitter of the dengue fever. I think during the current times of the pandemic, Cuban and American scientists should also get together, work jointly on vaccines and other important measures. And I hope that the new Biden administration will do some important steps in that direction. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eine. I think this was very interesting and very important to us to hear a bit about the history of this exchange. Thanks very much. This was very nice. So this brings us to the end of our panel discussion. I see there are several questions to the panel. Anna, do you have some questions which you would like to bring up to the panel?
Yes, actually, we received a couple of questions and comments. from the audience, which I would like to present and hear, of course, your answers and opinions on that. So the first one comes from Edgar Goe, and he's writing, I think we have now a window of opportunity to collaborate with colleagues in the US, science foundations and networks, to demand from the incoming administration free travel and exchange for full and unlimited cooperation with Cuban colleagues and scientific institutions and organizations. This is maybe something that also Rainer talked about, that we have a change now, and we
I could make a brief comment.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's an important point. I think there's a lot happening right now in the United States. Many academic and scientific institutions are in fact calling upon the Biden administration to reverse most of the restrictions that the Trump administration has implemented. So there's a lot of pressure happening, and I think it is important for those who believe in science and scientific collaboration with Cuba to speak up and to resume some of the activities that have been frozen over the last couple of years. But of course, this is part of a bigger package of a bigger political agenda that probably will take some time to implement. And unfortunately, the relations with Cuba are not the only problem for the Biden administration that they have to deal with. So I think it will take some time, but I think there is some pressure from important scientific institutions also in the United States that go in that direction, and that is important.
Okay. Would anybody else like to comment on this question? Thank you. Then I will continue with the next comment from Michael Dittmar. In case I had the great chance via some financial help from the ICTP Trieste and supported by my home university ETHZ to visit Havana each time for 3 weeks and the INSTEC and give short versions of my ETHC lectures on energy and environment in the 21st century and the question of sustainability at INSTEC. It was a great experience to work in exchange together with the students and colleagues during both visits, and as free and open exchange as it can be. I can only encourage colleagues to try to share their knowledge with students in Cuba. I would like to express my gratitude to all my friends in Cuba who made this possible. So this is a kind of very positive comment, and we can only hope that there will be more actions like this, even from persons who go and do something in Cuba. Would anybody like to comment? Fine, then I will continue with the next one from Uwe Pausen. Since this has just been mentioned by Mrs. Katai, hardware is missing, computers, headsets, microphones, laptops. Wouldn't it be an idea to collect all the hardware that is regularly exchanged at the German institutes network here and send it in a container to the universities? I think that the humanitarian Cuba Aid e.V. in Bochum could provide the logistics. The HCH e.V. regularly sends containers with urgently needed things to Cuba, last week. It would be important that the computers are not too old and fulfill certain criteria. A little help, but maybe someone will take up the idea, and there are the contacts cubahilfe@web.de, Uwe Pausen, and even a phone number 017772787446. Yes, Ms. Katai, you wanted to comment.
Yes, the idea is certainly excellent, and we had the same idea 3 years ago in 2017. I also collected a huge amount of materials, computer, printers, fax, all sorts of electronics given by our Bonn physicist colleague, server, all the dismissed server from the Atlas experiment, with the idea of bringing it to Cuba. Unfortunately, in 2017, it was impossible to find an organization or somebody that could bring the equipment in a permanent way to Cuba. And in any case, certain equipment has the embargo. Everything that contains Intel, as an example, like most of the computers, could not be transported by the embargo problem.
But maybe there is an opportunity now, and not all of the computers have Intel, so this would also be
maybe
a possibility.
Maybe there is a possibility, and if there is this possibility, please keep in mind that at CERN, I still have a lot of equipment that could be transported.
So maybe Uwe Paulsen should get in touch with you, or you with Uwe Paulsen, who posted his contacts. That would be at least some great outcome, first outcome of this session.
Uwe, would you like to say something directly on that? Should I give you the mic?
Uwe Paulsen wrote, "Hello, the embargo doesn't matter to us," but we can of course give the mic to Uwe.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hello. Yeah, the embargo doesn't matter to us, of course, but we're sending containers since 25 years. In the last years, it was a bit difficult, but in the moment we have got away. Maybe the ambassador, Mr. Ruppel, can help us to make this way free, to send them to the Ministry of Science. Would be an idea. I think we can manage that in Bochum, so we are used to that. And also there are other non-governmental organizations who can do that in Germany.
I think this is great news. So we establish contacts between you and CERN to deliver whatever we want to Cuba. Perfect. This is great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
So everybody can, if there's a possibility, maybe not a full container, but we can sometimes maybe we can send such equipment which must be in a very relatively new conditions, not the old computers. That's also a problem of the donations we get in the last time.
Yes, of course. You cannot use the old software, the hardware, to use the new software many times.
So that was the idea, that the institutions get their computers and also and they change it after 2 or 3 years.
Thank you very much. That's this great input. And I don't know if anybody wants to comment on this issue. Otherwise, I have a question for Hannes. Hannes, we have 2 colleagues, Tobias Kraft and Katrin Hansing, who would like to know more about the Humboldt Highway. Is there a timeline for this project? Is this still at the idea stage, or where is it at?
Yes, thanks very much for this question. The Humboldt Highway project was something we launched together with Fernando, I think last year, where we thought we should make an initiative to get some fast internet connection to Cuba to allow scientific exchange. At that time, we thought that one could build up on some techniques to establish such a highway like satellites or whatever, but all that turned out to be very difficult and not really practical. What could be done and what seems to be possible is that one could support from here, one could support the university institutes to buy from the local telephone company in Cuba to buy internet access with a necessary, reliable and big enough bandwidth, and thus make available internet access at the university. So this could be something on a very short time scale. This could be done just on agreement between different institutions, and that one supports for scientific exchange, supports buying some or supporting the local telephone company to provide internet access at the university, like a mobile flat rate or something like that. We are in discussions to see how that can be technically done, but I think this is not an issue of months, but just an issue of a couple of weeks until we get this working, given the positive response we heard today from our Director General and also from the rector or the vice rector of the INSTEC Institute, and the positive response of the ambassador of Cuba. I think this should be doable within the next couple of weeks. Does that answer the question?
I do not see any comments on what you said yet, but maybe somebody's typing, or maybe somebody would like to contribute live.
I don't know. I saw that Tobias Kraft is with us as well, and they have an important digital Humboldt project with Cuba. So I don't know if Tobias Kraft wants to.
Tobias Kraft actually just wrote too. So the idea is to invest in local Cuban bandwidth infrastructure.
Okay.
It's a question.
So Tobias, do you want to say something?
Yes. Hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you all for doing this panel. I think it's a wonderful way of getting to know so many people who work at the intersection of Cuban and German academia. I'm very interested. We have a project ourselves. Ramon Ripoll knows very well about this project, and and of course does his wife. Our project is called the Digital Humboldt Project, and we actually work on the digitization of cultural heritage, mostly cultural memory objects, and then specifically archival records from the 19th century. So the question of bandwidth and bandwidth infrastructure, of course, for our project is as crucial as for any other digital-born project. We are working with Cuban institutions together to create local infrastructure in the area of digital humanities. But what, of course, we cannot do is provide the digital infrastructure needed to process data from one space to another, right? And so this is why I was so interested in your idea of a Humboldt highway. And of course, as you can imagine, I like the name since we here at the Academy of Sciences and Humanities in Berlin, we work on Humboldt. So he is our object of study, so to speak. Yeah, so just to ask my question again, the idea then is to invest in existing local infrastructure in Cuba to basically provide money in order to finance, better finance a local internet connectivity. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. This is the short-term thing we came up with, that this could be doable. Of course, long-term solutions would be even better. There are plans to, or there is already plans to have a fast internet connection via Brazil, via South America, but there is exactly the problem then that Cuba is not included because of the blockade and the embargo. And this, of course, has to be overcome. But that could be a short-term solution, just to invest in local telecompany. Okay.
And if I might just add one last thing concerning the import of hardware, since this is such a pressing topic. We made the experience, we bought quite some hardware for this project, which already was successfully shipped to La Habana. And one of the key aspects of success there, from my experience, is that, of course, we are talking about buying specific hardware for a project, not reusing existing hardware, for example, from CERN, right, where you have the hardware already. So my experience is asking the Cuban colleagues and the Cuban institutions what kind of hardware they can use and they are capable of integrating into the existing local infrastructure is key. For example, we had to only use Huawei infrastructure, Chinese technology, which of course is not a problem for our Cuban colleagues. On the contrary, they work with the Chinese hardware. And so basically following that path, it was not a problem. I mean, it was a lot of work, of course, but it was not a problem to get that done. And the second aspect, I think, was key also to have strong institutions as your partners in Cuba that are capable of managing the heavy workload that needs to be done when you actually do want to import something, because it's not only your work that you put in from Europe, it's the work from your local partner that needs to be ready to do the administrative work in order to import that hardware. If you have such a partner who is capable of doing that, in our case, it's the Oficina del Historiador de la Ciudad de La Habana, fortunately a great and very competent and big institution which can handle these kinds of issues, then this can be done. And we actually did do it. But yeah, it took us about a year to import scanners and server infrastructure and even Wi-Fi hotspots. So just a brief note here on the practicalities of these things from my perspective.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
May I intervene? Yeah, a comment on the previous speaker. Yes, if you wanted to import things which have not the embargo, which I agree with you, it's possible, and people in Havana are extraordinarily efficient to bring the things and help. The point is that most of the equipment that we do have in our laboratories are subject to the embargo. And also, if Cuban people are extraordinarily efficient, they cannot overcome that.
Hannes, we have 2 more questions and comments. So would you like to present them? and
Yes.
close the
Rebecca,
discussion after that?
Yes, I was just wondering, Rebecca, do you want to just present your questions and talk immediately?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
loud and clear.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I just sent a message. And first of all, in the message, I was saying that it's a great initiative for this panel to support the fight against the U.S. blockade imposed on Cuba, and you've all discussed which are the challenges that you have. I come from the University of Havana. I am right now working at the University of Kassel as the scientific coordinator of CALAS, the Center for Advanced Latin American Studies. And we have several projects that between Kassel and the University of Havana. And one of the challenges that we are facing, which is very difficult to overcome, is one of the issues that you've already mentioned, that has to do with the funding organization, especially of the exchange and the mobility, because it's very challenging. It's very difficult for us, for example, to cover the expenses for Cuban professors, Cuban students to come to Germany, because they have to pay for things, and that's basically impossible for Cubans. And for us as an institution, we don't have the institutional path, because we don't have the bank possibilities to send these grants to Cuba. So for us, it's very valuable for all of you to be able to address these issues and also to bring them to a higher level of discussion, because of course it has to do with the whole financial and banking system of Germany, the restraints that the blockade imposes for this kind of exchanges for Cuba. So I just wanted to comment this, and again, thank you for joining this initiative to make the relation and the collaboration easier and better and greater. So thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody want to comment on what Rebecca said? We then have a question for Rainer from. Yeah, does anybody want to speak? I hear. No. Okay, then not. From Katrin Hansing, does Rainer know if one of the MOUs of the Obama administration focused on the internet, and might this be revisited by Biden?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of the question. Could you repeat?
So, of course. Does Rainer know if one of the MOUs of the Obama administration focused on the internet, and might this be revisited by Biden?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's, off my head, if there's a specific MOU on the internet, but some of the MOUs on scientific cooperation include de facto internet usage. And so we also know that, for example, the CEO of Google had been to Havana in 2000, I believe it was 16, to explore internet opportunities in Cuba. There's a small kind of workshop in a Google-financed internet project in the outskirts of Havana. And so there were a couple of attempts. I'm sure that the US administration would be interested in internet collaboration. That's something that the Obama administration had emphasized. But that's, of course, also a question of the Cuban government with whom they want to collaborate on the internet infrastructure here in this country. And so, you know, that's probably something that remains to be seen. But what is clear is that most of the restrictions, not all, but most, come through because of the sanctions. And so platforms like Zoom, access to certain digital resources are very difficult, either prohibited or impossible to access from here, from Cuba. And most of us who are on this panel who have experience in this world can probably tell many stories about it. So no clear answer, but I know there have been attempts in the past. There's probably an interest for the future. And that's obviously a great topic for bilateral conversations between the Cuban and the US government. And just a brief comment on the previous question from Rebecca. You know, and Ulrike could probably say more about it, but the way we invited Cuban scholars to the United States, given all the difficulties, was that we would usually pay for the airplane ticket from the States, we would pay for the visa cost from the States, and then once the Cubans arrived to the United States, they could be issued their stipends and honorariums, etc., which is then another question, the taxing issues, but that's usually the way we did it from the United States. And it is problematic because there are very few banks left over that have direct commercial relations with Cuba. And hopefully that is something that will change in the future as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Hannes, let's do one last question. Good. Oh, Katrin Hansing is just saying thank you. Great panel. Thank you, Katrin. And the last question from Astrid Wind from the University of Heidelberg. Thank you very much for these great initiatives at the Heidelberg Graduate School for the Humanities and Social Sciences. At Heidelberg University, we have invited excellent doctoral scholars from the Universidad de La Habana for 6 to 7 months in recent years. They researched their PhD thesis, took part in our interdisciplinary seminars, and published a book with us at Heidelberg University. In 2021, 5 more PhDs will join the HGGS. The initiative is being funded by the Baden-Württemberg. Oh, sorry, the text disappeared suddenly. The initiative is being funded by the Baden-Württemberg Foundation. One PhD from the law faculty is being funded for 2 months by the DAAD this semester. It is always a great pleasure to work with these highly motivated scholars, and I wonder how we can promote more mobility of PhDs from Cuba coming to Heidelberg. Can the DAAD play an active role in this exchange in the humanities and social sciences?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Astrid Wind, for this question. I'm happy that we can communicate this way. I know your name since a long time, but we haven't met so far. Yes, it's always a wish of both sides to have even more support for PhD students. What the DAAD always has is the individual grants. So regularly you can apply for complete doctorates in Germany, or the so-called sandwich doctorate. So let's say 6 months in Cuba, 6 months in Germany, and for the whole doctorate period. It can be also a short-term stay for 3 months, for example. It can be an annual scientific or research stay. So we have several of those individual grant programs, and you have to play a bit with them. So one of your Cuban doctorants could perhaps first apply for a short-term grant and later on for a sandwich. Or if you have students who have finished their PhD, then there is another grant that is for postdoc researchers. Use that tool as well. There's alumni programs that is very important as well. So you can have re-invitations for doctoral students that have done their research in Germany. There's also the possibility to apply for material, for the material program for alumni, which is nice to combine with the individual mobility. So on this individual level, you have to play with the tools that we have. And we have very good contacts with the Baden-Württemberg Stiftung and with Beilat and with all the others who offer grants. So use our tools. If the cooperation is big, you can also apply for a project like Kassel has or like the Humboldt University has. And then, of course, you have more flexibility and more possibility to plan your exchange during some years. Or think about digital formats now. So with the new programs, IVEC, for example, for digital cooperation, if that can be an option, I think that's a good thing for the moment as well. I hope this can help a bit.
Astrid, do you want to say something or reply on that immediately? No. Okay.
So, Hannes, I think we have all our questions that were sent to us. Are there any further comments or questions from the audience or from the participants of the panel?
Okay, so it seems this is not the case. So I think the meeting today was very nice, very good. I'm very happy that so many people attended this meeting, and I think two main points came out. There is an increased interest and activity on establishing a fast internet connection to Cuba with this Humboldt Highway, and I think there are now different options and different people express interest, so we should get together to make this really happen and make this project for the next future. And the other thing which I was not expecting, but which I think is super great, is the possibility to have to send equipment to Cuba, thanks to the initiative and the activities of Uwe. I think then this is super nice because we can provide things and we can help to get the equipment to Cuba and to have it installed there, and that if we have the fast internet connection, that we can actually use it. So I think then this is really great, and we should work on these opportunities to get something real done. I think then this is a super nice outcome of this discussion we had today. I'm really very happy. And before we close the session today, I would like to thank everybody from the panel. That is Dr. Michael Marquez Miyares, the Vice Decan from INSTAC. This is Professor Dosch, the chairman of the DESY Board of Directors. This is Professor Fernando Guzman from INSTAC University Havana, Dr. Sandra Conseca Rodriguez from DESY, Dr. Armando Bermudez Martinez from DESY, Dr. Ariela Katai from CERN, Dr. Ulrike Dorfmüller from German Academic Exchange Program, and Dr. Reinhard Schulz from the Consortium for advanced studies abroad. I think this was really super great that you all attended. And of course, it was very nice and a very good start of the meeting to have the ambassador, Mr. Ramon Ripoll Diaz, to give a start of our discussion. Thanks very much for this very good and very nice introduction. And many thanks, of course, also to all our colleagues from the Science and Society Initiative DESY and the Havana Initiative for all their initiative and enthusiasm and support and ideas. The whole event would not have been possible without the help of people in the background, and in particular from the DESY Public Relations Department. There is Thomas Sufal and Britta Liebaug who made the poster and the press announcement, and especially from our IT service, we got super great help in setting up everything. Thanks very much to Sarah Steenken. Without your help, this whole thing would not have been possible. So thanks everybody for this very nice event today. We have the recording, which will be made public, and we will answer all the questions. We will make all the questions public on our web pages so that everybody can look at them and read them and see what can be done in future. And of course, we will keep the contact, and we will get in contact with everybody to make the Humboldt Highway and sending over the equipment to Cuba possible. Thanks very much.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you because I have to say thank you to you, because without you, all of this would not happen. So this is my biggest thank you to you for organizing everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a very nice evening, a very nice morning or afternoon, and hope to see you all soon again on this channel. Thanks very much and have a nice day. Bye-bye.